I did the matrix, and so I was going through that and like noticing that so many of these things felt so commingled. Like I'm going through the exercises and like writing about one of these things or like one of the five core issues, and I'm like, yeah, but that feels like child and teen, or like I know that you said like they're often commingled, but it felt so hard to separate it out to like address it.
It can be because I mean, they're going to be commingled, meaning like you're noticing triggering in both areas.
Mm.
So like essentially in the child place and the teen place. So what you want to do is try to identify the thoughts that are really just linked with closed or perfect or needless or better than.
Okay.
You want to take those and place them into the teen area. And then you want to take the thoughts that feel or are telling you that you're not worth as much, or you're exposed, or you're defective, you're needy. You start with the thoughts, and then basically you kind of just put them where they belong, essentially. Because otherwise, which is cool, by the way, that you have access to both. A lot of people don't have access to both. Like they just have child things going on. They're not noticing the teen stuff, or they're in a teen place and they have no ability to connect to the child. Mm-hmm. So even though it kind of makes, quote, a little bit more work for you, at least you know exactly where they fit. So does that sound doable though, for you to kind of be like, this particular triggering thought really feels like a defective, or this one really feels, or you think you might be able to do that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like it was like after I'd started doing the exercise that I noticed it like, oh, these are really like, hang on, now I feel like I have multiple personalities going on here.
No, you're okay. Do you have an example kind of one of them, or something that is maybe most triggering for you, and I can place it in the matrix for you?
Hang on, let me go back through here was one like of the thought of I don't deserve the money, right? That going back to, well, maybe I feel like I don't deserve it because I don't want to work harder to make the money. Like
okay.
The issues themselves are so commingled that I'm like, okay, crap, how do I sort that? Separate them to address them.
Okay, very good example. So you're just gonna basically, you're gonna notice that you're gonna move into other areas, but you wanna pare back. And so like if you know that it's like, I don't deserve it, that's the one that you wanna focus on, and you just wanna work on that one.
Okay.
And then the other one of I don't work hard enough to get it, what's happening is that you're just starting to notice like other bits of triggering that are linked to these kind of core triggers around money. So it can be overwhelming. And so what I want you to do is to write them all down. Like take all those thoughts and write them down. Not because you're going to do something with them immediately, but get them out of your head,
okay.
And write them on a piece of paper. If you can identify the feelings that go with those thoughts, and then you can place them in the matrix, then you have a bunch of different, correction lights to make, basically correction light.
And then I can kind of like split them off. So for like one area, there's like a child component and a teen component, then I can just split them up and address them separately instead of trying to do it all at once under the same umbrella.
And you can't do it all at once. Actually, the thing is that for it to really work well, you need to do them separately.
Okay.
So the reason why you also put them in the matrix is that if you have anything in the teen column, like let's say you have, I don't deserve it, like a less than for worth, but then you have a better than, like you're like, well, it doesn't matter because rich people are. You would actually do rich people are first.
Okay.
You always want to.
You've got to take the protection down before you can deal with the super vulnerable.
That's correct. Right? That's right. Very nice. So like basically like here's your child, and the teen is she's over your child.
Okay.
So whenever you do a teen correction, you move her out of the way. Even just a little bit is helpful, and then you can get to this child. It's not that the child is more important than the teen. Your teen is like your defense structure around everything. And then the child technically is actually the original wounding. But that's not necessarily that important for you at this point, kind of working on this. You don't need to know all that to do it. But it would be helpful if you did the teen first and then the child second.
Kind of like trying to crack into a safe. You've got to crack the outside of it before you can get to what's inside.
Correct. You have to take care of the teen because her job is to protect your child essentially from everything that's going on in the child area. So if you split them up, you're going to notice that, most people, because money is very triggering, which is why we're focusing on it kind of first in this business, is that, most people have 8 corrections to make, at least 8, because you're going to have at least one less than, at least one exposed, at least one defective. But that's it. They're at a core level. And if you have identified them as triggering, and you line them up with this matrix, you can rest assured that you're at a deep level. So even though you have 8 to do, if you do all 8, you've corrected at a very deep level.
And that makes me feel way less screwed up knowing that like that many is like normal.
It's totally normal. I mean, when I work with people privately on money, they definitely have their 8 that are kind of the core, and that's what I'm good at doing, is drilling down to what they are. But they start with like 30 or 40 different things, like literally. So don't worry about it. You're not all messed up or jacked
You
up.
can do corrections forever. Everybody, there's no point where you're done. You're like, you know what? That was my last correction. Life is now. Take it out.
But you might get to a point that I agree with you, but you might get to a point where you don't need to do more in a certain area. You know, without me there, what we're trying to do is to have you be able to distill down as deep as possible, even without me there telling you exactly what to do. Or so, you just want to capture your thoughts, anything that's spiky for you around money, and then write them down. And then worry about putting them in the matrix. You don't have to start with the matrix. You can start with just your triggering. And I encourage all clients to journal. And so basically, not like dear diary, but like actually things that stick out for you around money. And so you just make a little note. You put a little note in your phone and you're like, okay, this is what's going on with me. And then where does that little note or that bit of triggering, where does it fit? And for some people, it's easier to sit down and look at the matrix and go, I'm less than in this way, closed in this way, defective in this way. But I like kind of doing both. Like I always have clients have a running journal of what's occurring, and then we figure out what happens with the matrix from that point. You want to bind your corrections to whatever you're most triggered by. So like you want to make sure the context of the correction. So like, for example, if it's like, oh, I'm really triggered by this whenever I see things in a magazine that I want to purchase. You want to tailor your correction to be focused around that bit of triggering, that when I'm most triggered by it, when it's the spikiest, is whenever I look at magazines. It's just an example. Or when I go to my sister's house and she has a G-Wagon, or whatever it is that's going on with her. She doesn't have a G-Wagon, but she wants a G-Wagon. But whatever it is that's going on with people. So you want to bind it to where the triggering showed up, and you will also get a better result.
And then Euros, I think is how you pronounce it, had a question of where does eagerness fall into? I would assume needy.